To make a living, a single mother agrees to bathe a paraplegic millionaire. But what happens next will leave you speechless. Stay tuned to find out. Michael Taylor drove in silence in a luxury car as the Icelandic landscape unfolded before her. The road wound around Lake Jökulsárlón, surrounded by snow-capped peaks that seemed to touch the sky. Beside her, Samantha Harrington tapped her impeccable nails on her cell phone screen, her expression absorbed in the device. Despite the stunning scenery, the atmosphere inside the car was tense. After a long silence, Samantha broke the ice with a tone full of dissatisfaction. "Michael, we've been together for over a year. What are you waiting for to formalize this? Or maybe you don't even intend to marry me." Without taking his eyes off the road, Michael sighed, his voice calm but filled with a slight tiredness. "Maybe the Bentley, the trip to Iceland, and the ring you're wearing are small steps forward. When did I stray so far from your engagement manual?" Samantha huffed, crossing her arms, clearly frustrated. "Do you really think a car and a trip to a glacier make up for a whole year of waiting for something real? Is that what I am to you? An exotic hobby between your business adventures and your luxury getaways? If you wanted something serious, we'd be planning a wedding, not driving around frozen wastelands." Michael gripped the steering wheel lightly, taking a deep breath to keep his cool. After a brief glance at his fiancée, he replied, his voice thick with coldness. "I thought you understood something fundamental, Samantha. Love is not a marriage contract. It's how two people walk together down the same road. And honestly, sometimes I wonder if we're headed in the same direction." Samantha turned abruptly to face her, her eyes shining with indignation. "Of course, because in your head, the only life that matters here is yours. Walking together. Hard when the whole path is traced according to your whims, Michael." For a few moments, the only sound in the car was the engine and the wind whistling against the windows. Michael finally gave a bitter half-smile before retorting, "Well, since everything seems to be my fault and you have all the answers, then tell me, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Who knows? If you are so brilliant as to solve this, maybe you can handle me and a life together. In that case, I propose to you immediately." Samantha blinked, perplexed, before exploding. "What nonsense is this? You know that this question has no answer, Michael." The argument intensified, and neither of them noticed that Michael, distracted, had swerved the car slightly into the opposite lane on a blind curve. The sound of the tires roaring on the wet road cut through the silent night. Michael, driving his Bentley, felt the weight of his own thoughts when, suddenly, bright headlights broke through the darkness. A truck appeared in front of him, and the impact seemed inevitable. At that moment, something became clear to him. When the world collapses, all that remains is to protect the one you love. Without thinking twice, he turned the steering wheel with a firm movement, swerving the car so that the side absorbed the impact. His intention was clear: to protect Samantha, who was at his side, even if it cost him dearly. In a matter of seconds, the deafening shock took over the environment, and Michael's vision was consumed by absolute darkness. When he woke up, hours later, the hospital lights momentarily blinded him. Lying in bed, he listened to the doctor explain the severity of his injuries. "The damage to your spinal cord is significant. It is likely that you will never walk again," the professional declared, with a serious but restrained tone. Michael remained still, processing the news. Beside him, Samantha listened to everything, but seemed more concerned with the small mirror in her hands, adjusting her lipstick. "That's terrible," she commented, with an empty tone that sounded almost automatic. "But we can find the best physiotherapists, can't we?" Michael closed his eyes, choosing silence. More than the loss of his mobility, it was Samantha's attitude that hit him like a blow. The real tragedy, he thought, was not the paralysis of his body, but the coldness of the person who should have been by his side. A few weeks later, Michael was in his villa, looking out the window at the snow-capped peaks in the distance. The wheelchair had become an extension of himself, but the greater weight was that of his soul, now burdened with doubts and resentments. Samantha, on the other side of the room, was adjusting her makeup with impeccable precision. "I would hire someone to help," she said, with a lightness that irritated him deeply. "I wouldn't expect my perfect nails to be sacrificed." Before he could respond, a soft knock on the door interrupted the tense atmosphere. Samantha opened it quickly and greeted a young woman with a superficial smile. "Good morning, I'm Clara. I've come to take care of Mr. Michael." Samantha interrupted her hurriedly, dismissing formalities. "Great, I'm late." She leaned over, planted a hurried kiss on Michael's cheek, and left, leaving only the sound of her heels echoing through the house. Michael looked at Clara. There was something in her eyes, a mixture of firmness and compassion that contrasted with Samantha's superficiality. For the first time in days, he felt that he was in hands that truly cared. Samantha stopped beside the young woman, leaning in slightly and whispering in her ear, "Whatever his name is, give him a bath and please try to get rid of so much bitterness." Without waiting for an answer, she stood up, arranged her designer bag with a theatrical gesture, and left the room, closing the door with calculated softness. The young woman stood there in silence as the sound of the door slammed into the room. With a mixture of compassion and professionalism, she remained still, watching Michael. He remained staring at the horizon, his hands tensely resting on the arms of the wheelchair, as if he were carrying an invisible burden. After a few seconds, the young woman took a firm but careful step, approaching. "Mr. Taylor," she began, in a calm, gentle voice, "I am Lillian John Doir. I am here to help you." Without moving his eyes from the window, Michael closed his eyelids for a moment. His fingers lightly tightened on the leather of the chair, and he answered in an acidic tone, "And has my fiancée already told you to prepare her bath?" Lillian hesitated for a moment, absorbing the words loaded with sarcasm. Then she answered calmly, "I am not here for her, sir. I am here to take care of you." Michael turned his head slowly, fixing his eyes on her with an expression of weariness and irritation. "Why do you think you can help me? Why should anyone bathe a stranger?" His voice was harsh, almost a growl. "I didn't hire you. Leave me alone." Lillian remained where she was, her expression unchanging, but her eyes conveyed something beyond patience, but deep empathy. "I'm not here to invade your privacy or impose anything, sir. I just want to help you feel a little better." "Better?" Michael spun his chair around with difficulty, facing her directly. His dark eyes were filled with fury, but also with raw, desperate pain. "Nothing will make me feel better. Don't you understand? I'm a broken man, trapped in this chair, unable to be anything." His voice rose a little, echoing through the room, but soon he let it die, swallowed by silence. Lillian took another step, slowly approaching. Her words came in a lower tone, almost a whisper, but loaded with meaning. "The soul is tested in the silence of suffering, sir, and those who remain motionless on the outside can sometimes learn to fly." Inside, Michael's eyes softened, and his rigid posture began to sag. Lillian's words had completely dismantled the fortress of bitterness he had built up over time. He sighed, almost in a whisper. "Okay," he said with resignation. "Prepare the bathroom for me, please." Lillian smiled, a serene smile that did not celebrate a victory, but rather the opening of a door. Without another word, she headed for the bathroom, leaving Michael alone with his thoughts. The sound of running water soon filled the room. It was a steady, soothing murmur that seemed to soften the tense atmosphere. Michael looked out the window again. The horizon, which had seemed so oppressive before, now seemed less bleak, perhaps even a little hopeful. Inside the bathroom, the space was soon filled with the invigorating scent of essential oils. The purifying eucalyptus and fresh rosemary combined to create an atmosphere of serenity. The steam rose in thin spirals, dancing with the soft light, transforming the space into an intimate and almost ethereal refuge. Lillian, with precise and careful gestures, helped Michael into the bath. Each movement seemed designed to dissipate tension without invading his privacy. As she ran the sponge over his skin, her low, soothing voice filled the silence. "Sir, take a deep breath with me," she said, pausing for him to take in the aroma of the essential oils. "Let this air fill you with calm. And as you exhale, imagine that you are releasing everything that weighs down your soul." Michael did not respond, but obeyed silently. He inhaled deeply, then exhaled slowly, almost with a sigh. Little by little, his shoulders, previously so rigid, began to relax. As she worked, Lillian noticed a long, jagged scar that ran down his back, from the top of his spine to his lower back. Her fingers hesitated for a moment, then continued, careful not to disturb him. Still, her curiosity could not be contained. "Mr. Taylor," she said cautiously, "I apologize for asking, but this scar is so deep." Michael tensed again, and his posture, which had relaxed, stiffened as before. He remained silent for a few seconds, then replied in a low, sharp voice, "They didn't tell you anything when they hired you?" "No, sir," she replied calmly. "Your fiancé only mentioned that you needed personal care." He laughed bitterly, with a hint of sarcasm. Of course she wouldn't say anything. After a moment's hesitation, he continued, "It was a car accident. I turned the steering wheel to protect someone who was next to me. The price? My legs. The surgery was an emergency attempt to stabilize my spine. I woke up and heard the doctor say that I would never walk again." The silence was profound in the room, broken only by Michael's soft breathing. Lillian, with her calm and serene voice, spoke, "There is something very powerful in what you did that day, sir. You decided to protect someone without thinking of yourself. That speaks of a strong heart, even if you don't feel that way now." Michael, with a bitter expression, interrupted her almost immediately. "A strong heart? All I have left of that is this miserable wheelchair and a damned scar." Lillian listened, in no hurry to respond. She paused for a moment, absorbing his outburst, and then, with unshakable calm, she replied, "Yes, the wheelchair may seem like a burden, sir, but it is also a gift. How many in your situation wouldn't like to have a second chance to continue living, even if in a different way?" He frowned, not wanting to admit that there was any truth to her words, but with a harsh tone he replied, "Let's assume you're right about the chair. But what about that horrible scar? It's disgusting, I hate it. Maybe you have an answer for that too." Lillian was silent for a moment, allowing the calm to take over the room. She looked at him and, with impressive serenity, answered, "Scars are not closed wounds, sir. They are maps, drawn by time, that teach us how to return home." Michael, surprised by the depth of the answer, let out a small laugh of contempt, still full of irony. "I prefer real maps that actually lead me somewhere. This thing about returning home is the most ridiculous phrase I've ever heard." Lillian, looking at him seriously, answered quietly, "Sir, returning home is finding the way to the only place you really need to go." Her words hung in the air, and for the first time, Michael felt completely disarmed. He wanted to say something, but nothing came out. Instead, his mind began to ponder, inadvertently, her depth. He wondered why she, being only a simple servant, could disarm him so easily. Why could she touch him in such a profound way when he knew so well about the world and its many layers? The water continued to fall gently, filling the space with a soothing murmur. The scent of the bath enveloped the room, and for the first time, Michael felt somehow exposed and at the same time comforted. Lillian, sensing the need for a small gesture of assistance, spoke softly. "Now, I will help you out of the tub." She draped a large towel over his shoulders to protect him from the cold, adjusting the wheelchair close to the tub. With careful movements, she positioned a transfer board, connecting the chair to the bathtub. Lillian, always attentive to detail, supported Michael's arms respectfully, without invading his personal space. "Let me do all the work, sir. You don't have to worry about a thing." Michael sighed in resignation as she transferred him to the wheelchair. Everything was done with such precision that he almost forgot about the discomfort he felt. "Now, I'm going to move you to the bed so you can be more comfortable," she said with a slight smile, and used the transfer board again to carefully move him. Once in bed, Lillian adjusted a blanket over Michael's legs and then asked, "If I may, sir, I would like to offer a therapeutic massage for your legs." Michael, with a curious and skeptical look, raised an eyebrow. "And how do you know how to do that, Lillian?" She smiled softly, beginning to apply the aromatic oils she had found in the bathroom. "I learned it from my mother when I was a child. She always said that our hands can heal. We put more than technique into them, we put soul and intention." Michael watched Lillian curiously, but something in his gaze changed when he asked the question. "You speak in the past tense. Why?" Lillian hesitated, interrupting the gentle rhythm of her movements. She knew this was an unusual question, and for a moment, the massage was in suspense. With a thoughtful look, Lillian answered slowly, "My mother died a few years ago." Lillian's voice was calm, but each word seemed to carry an immense weight. "She showed me the value of resilience, taught me to see life from a different angle, not through complaining or whining, but through self-empowerment." Michael was silent, absorbing Lillian's words. "I'm sorry for your loss," he said, trying to sound sincere. But then a hint of bitterness crept into his voice. "But your mother certainly wasn't in a wheelchair when she shared these teachings with you. It's easy to talk about resilience when you don't have to prove it." Lillian didn't stop moving her hands, keeping her touch gentle. Her voice remained calm, but there was a quiet strength in her words. "That's exactly what resilience is, sir. It's not about how life challenges us, but how we choose to respond." Michael frowned, confused. "What do you mean by that?" he asked, trying to understand. Lillian paused, as if her words needed time to settle in the air. She took a deep breath and continued her massage even more gently, as if she were trying to heal something beyond the body. Michael, who had initially withdrawn emotionally, now felt a growing discomfort. He wanted to push the thought away, but he couldn't. "In my mother's last days, I couldn't stop crying," Lillian said softly, almost as if she were talking to herself. "Then my mother took my hand, smiled, and said to me, 'When life breaks you, remember that water doesn't run over smooth rocks, but through cracks.'" Michael swallowed hard, feeling a tightness in his chest. Something inside him, a wounded pride or a repressed pain, began to give way. He had always closed himself off from the world, but Lillian's words seemed to be breaking the barriers of his heart. He felt, for the first time in a long time, something other than anger or frustration. It was pain, a real, human pain, something Michael no longer knew how to deal with. "Yes," he thought with a lump in his throat, "we should definitely never judge a book by its cover." Michael looked at Lillian, who continued to massage him in silence. She, with her calm, seemed to understand something he had never understood. A simple woman without ostentation, but with a depth that he could barely comprehend. The silence between them was broken when Michael, almost without meaning to, murmured, I think I felt something." Lillian looked up, without interrupting her massage, and asked softly, "What did you feel, sir?" Her voice, soft, had a touch of emotion, something almost imperceptible, but that did not go unnoticed by Michael. He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to understand what he was feeling. "Almost nothing," he answered, but at the same time, he noticed a slight tingling in his right leg. Lillian smiled lightly, but her expression remained serene, not letting her emotion take over. Michael, his voice barely audible, murmured, "I don't know if I have the strength to wait any longer, Milagros." She took his hand gently, with a touch that seemed intended to calm him. "You don't have to wait, sir," Lillian replied. "You can be your own miracle, but to do that, you have to start believing in yourself." Lillian paused, letting the silence fill the room as she looked at him with a combination of seriousness and tenderness. Her hands rested gently on Michael's legs, but her eyes seemed to probe something much deeper within him. "Excuse me, I'd like to try something," she said, her voice full of attention. Michael gave her a skeptical look, but there was something in the way she said it that made him let his guard down. "I do," he replied, still not believing it would make a difference. "Although I don't think it will help." Lillian smiled softly, saying nothing, and stood up with precision. She began searching the room for something soft to use, something with a soft texture for her purpose. Within seconds, she found what she was looking for: a decorative feather, a wet washcloth, and a container of warm water. "My mother was an expert at these things," she said, as she prepared the materials. Although she never learned at university, she was self-taught. Her love for physical therapy was unmatched. She always said that the body can be taught to remember if we know how to speak to it in the right language. As she prepared the tools, Lillian asked an almost ironic question: "And how do you do that?" "With patience and faith," Michael replied, as if he already knew the answer. "Patience to hear what you need, and faith to believe that you can answer." She approached again, and with the tools in her hands, leaned over Michael's still legs. She began to slide the feather gently over his skin, from ankle to knee, making almost imperceptible movements. Michael watched with discomfort and bewilderment, shaking his head but saying nothing. The calmness in Lillian's movements prevented him from responding sarcastically. After a few minutes, she dipped the towel in the warm water and carefully placed it over his calf. "Heat and cold are like day and night," Lillian said, moving the towel gently. "One warms the body, the other calms it. My mother used to say that the balance between the two could open closed doors." Michael frowned. "Another metaphor," he muttered, already starting to get irritated. Lillian, smiling slightly, exchanged the warm towel for the cold one. "Metaphors are necessary when the soul needs to find meaning," she replied calmly. "What it doesn't understand, when the body seems to be asleep, is that sometimes it's not science that wakes it up, but the intention we put into trying." Michael remained silent, allowing Lillian's words to settle in his mind. He felt the gentle touch of the cold water, and although still confused, something inside him seemed to move, as if the sensation were real. But at the same time, he wondered if it was just a trick of the imagination. Lillian then took a small container of essential oils and poured a few drops into the palm of her hand. She rubbed her hands together to warm the oil, and with a calm look in her eyes, she said, "Body and soul are connected, sir." She began to gently massage the sole of his foot. "When one heals, the other does as well." Suddenly, Michael frowned and leaned forward slightly. Wait a moment," he said, his voice shaking. "I think I feel something." Lillian looked deep into his eyes, with an expectation that could almost be touched. "What do you feel, sir?" she asked, her voice soft but full of curiosity. "It's a tingling, like something is waking up," Michael murmured, his voice a mix of disbelief and faint hope. Lillian paused for a moment, allowing the moment to settle, and then, Her expression calm and focused, she continued. This time, she applied firmer pressure. The body never stops trying to heal, sir. Sometimes it just needs to be reminded of what it's capable of, she said, as if speaking not only to him, but to herself. Michael closed his eyes, allowing the feeling to wash over him. For the first time since the accident, he felt something other than hopelessness, something that seemed to be stirring inside him. Maybe all is not lost, he murmured, almost to himself, with a slight hesitation. Lillian didn't stop moving, but she responded with a calm that enveloped him like an embrace. Nothing is lost as long as there is something inside you that still wants to fight, she said with profound serenity. Do you know what my mother used to say? Even on the verge of death, with her illness already imminent, she always said, every obstacle in life is an invitation to discover a new path to follow. Even death itself for her was a door that nature wisely opened to begin again. Michael remained silent, absorbing those words. He felt a small but powerful possibility growing inside him, like a faint hope beginning to germinate. The air in the room seemed warmer, as if the atmosphere around him was beginning to transform. But that feeling was abruptly interrupted when a soft click resounded in the door latch. Michael and Lillian looked up at the same time, their gazes meeting. The door opened slowly, almost mysteriously, and they both held their breath, waiting for what would come next. What they saw on the other side left them perplexed. A girl of about 7 years old with brown hair and bright eyes identical to Lillian's entered with confident and sure steps. The silence was filled with an unusual joy and an overflowing self-confidence. "Mom, you're here!" the girl exclaimed, running towards Lillian and hugging her legs tightly. "I looked for you all over the mansion. I didn't let anyone see me like you said." Lillian initially turned pale, but soon her face flushed intensely. She stammered, trying to find an explanation for what had just happened. "Mr. Michael, I'm so sorry," she began, visibly nervous. "I ordered her not to leave our little room, but I promise you that." Before Lillian could continue, Michael interrupted her with a stern look. His jaw was tense and his tone was dry, almost cutting. "My fiancé hates children," he said with a sharp irony, "and in my condition, I don't think I would tolerate them either." The little girl, however, didn't seem to notice Michael's displeasure. She looked at her mother and with complete innocence asked, "Mom, can I play with him? I want to be a physical therapist when I grow up." Lillian, visibly disconcerted and trying to maintain her composure, tried to react quickly. "You can't stay here." Lillian watched in silence as the little girl approached Michael. Her eyes were fixed on the scene, but her mind was far away, as if a part of her was still trying to understand what was happening. Her hands were shaking, and the oil her mother had been using for so long seemed to weigh down her fingers. But she didn't hesitate. Her determination guided her. The little girl turned and walked firmly towards him. Michael, who was sitting calmly in his chair, looked at her with an unreadable expression. He didn't know what to do. He didn't know if he should stop her or simply let her continue. The girl, however, didn't seem to have any doubts.
Before we continue, I need to tell you something amazing. Do you want to attract a lot of money into your life? Learn how to do it with the secret content that I will leave in the first pinned comment and start transforming your financial life.
She looked at him with a radiant smile and said enthusiastically, "I'll help too. I want to help." Those words touched something deep inside Michael. It was as if something kept inside him was revealed. He felt a sensation he hadn't felt in years, a mix of vulnerability and a sweet pain that seemed to break all the rigidity he had built around himself. His heart, until then immune to any emotion, was melting at the innocence and determination of that girl. Before Michael could process what he was feeling, Lillian tried to intervene, her voice hurried. "Layla, please stop this," she asked, raising her hand, clearly worried. "You brought your daughter to this house without warning, without asking permission?" Michael asked, now with a less severe tone, but still full of disbelief. Lillian lowered her head, mumbling something in apology, but barely managed to answer before Layla, with all her innocence, interrupted. "What happened to your legs, sir?" the girl asked, leaning over to look at his feet, which were still. Then she smiled sweetly and added, "My mother says that what we lack in one place, life makes up for in another, and that makes us special. Her legs also try to be special." The girl's words floated through the air like a gentle breeze, but with a depth that paralyzed everyone present. The silence in the room was so intense that it seemed as if the wind outside had stopped. Michael swallowed hard, a lump tightening his throat. He closed his eyes for a moment, as if trying to protect himself from the wave of emotions that those words provoked within him. When he opened his eyes again, he saw Lillian trying to carefully remove the girl from the room. "Sorry, Mr. Michael. I'll get her out right now," she said, clearly embarrassed. But Michael interrupted her with a firm voice that made them both stiffen in surprise. "Leave her alone," he said, softer this time. "This girl is also welcome in this house, just like you. Teach her how to do it so that her little hands can help me achieve a miracle. A soul like hers is surely heard more by the angels than one like mine." Lillian's eyes filled with tears, and she could barely contain her emotion. Meanwhile, Layla, jumping with joy, ran towards Michael. "Thank you, sir," she exclaimed, with the brightest smile he had ever seen. The little girl began to touch his feet with small, clumsy, but enthusiastic hands. Each touch seemed to light up the entire room. Michael, who had long forgotten how to smile, felt something strange on his face. His lips curved slightly, and even his reflection in the nearby mirror looked different. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to imagine the possibility of something new, a renewed hope. The afternoon passed slowly, immersed in a silence filled with emotions floating in the air. Lillian worked with precision and delicacy on Michael's feet, her movements firm but careful. Beside him, Layla, with the energy typical of a child, hummed an Icelandic melody while doing the same on Michael's other foot, with the enthusiasm that only childhood could provide. The soft light of the sunset entered through the windows, covering the room with warm tones that contrasted with the coldness of the circumstances that had brought each of them there. Michael, lost in his own thoughts, could not help but feel touched by the presence of the two. Something in his soul seemed to move with each gesture of theirs. It was he who broke the silence with a direct question, as if trying to understand something that was troubling him. "So, are you married, Lillian?" She hesitated for a moment, barely looking at him, before calmly answering, "I'm a single mother, Michael." He shook his head, as if trying to understand something that didn't fit in with his thoughts. The girl's father must have died, he thought, but before he could comment, Lillian continued with her speech. "He's not alive," she said, keeping up the rhythm of the massage. Layla, still immersed in her melody, didn't realize the weight of the conversation. "He left us as soon as he found out I was pregnant." Lillian paused briefly, glancing sideways at Michael before adding, "And where did you get the idea that he couldn't be alive?" Michael let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. "Simple, Lillian," he answered, with a tone that sounded a little sad. "Only a man out of his mind or dead could lose a girl as wonderful as you." Lillian blinked, surprised by the answer, and her face flushed, something she couldn't hide. A shy smile formed on her lips as she concentrated on the movements of her hands again, trying to control the intensity of what she felt. Her cheeks burned, and that blush contrasted with the calm Michael tried to maintain. With a deep sigh, Michael looked out the window and, in a voice full of melancholy, murmured, "I thought I had it all, and yet I wanted more. After this, I don't know what I have, or what I had, or what I have left." Layla stopped fidgeting with Michael's feet for a moment. The weight of his words seemed to fill the room. But with a soft but firm voice, she answered, as if she had lived long enough to understand. "The truly rich man is not the one who has the most, but the one who needs the least to be happy." The silence after the girl's words was almost palpable. Michael remained motionless, absorbed in his own thoughts. Lillian's words seemed to reverberate in his mind, breaking down the barriers he had built over the years. The eyes that had once been hard and skeptical now reflected something different, a spark of a new perspective. Something was beginning to change inside him. From that moment on, the afternoons in Michael's living room became something different. With her mother's complicity, Layla found ways to sneak in to accompany her to therapy sessions, always without Samantha knowing, disappearing for hours and taking with her an energy that seemed to heal not only Michael's body, but also his soul. He began to surrender to the purity of both mother and daughter, who seemed to have a mission not only to restore his physical health, but also to give him back something he believed he had lost forever: the ability to feel the warmth of a genuine human bond. Meanwhile, Samantha, completely unaware of this new dynamic, spent most of her time outside the mansion. She was always late and avoided any interaction with Michael, her indifference slowly revealing the differences between the two worlds that he now perceived. Now these worlds coexisted under the same roof, and evening after evening, as Lillian and Layla continued their therapies, Michael felt something new and unsettling. What began as a slight shivering in his legs soon intensified with Layla's gentle and enthusiastic touch. There were days when a simple reflex would make his feet move a millimeter, or he would feel a wave of heat running down his calves, as if something was awakening in his body that he thought had been lost forever. Lillian was self-taught, but her approach seemed intuitive. With impressive dedication, she applied her techniques carefully. Sometimes she would tap gently, rhythmically, and other times she would alternate heat and cold on key points on Michael's body, all in an almost meditative pattern. She said she learned it all by watching her mother. Additionally, it incorporated passive exercises, moving Michael's joints precisely but gently to help him reconnect with his own ability to move. It was a difficult task for him. "There it is again," Michael murmured softly, afraid to say it out loud. His eyes sought Lillian. Her smile, calm and serene, filled the space. "Your body just needs time and perseverance," she replied, her tone encouraging. He was silent for a moment, observing his own stillness. "My legs seem to be waking up, like when I woke up and didn't want to go to school. But you woke me up anyway," Michael said, letting out a soft, almost imperceptible laugh. It was as if he were recognizing something inside himself, something that had previously seemed distant. Lillian smiled, pleased with the progress, and Layla, Lillian's daughter, gently touched Michael's body with her small hands, still clumsy, but with clear intention. Michael closed his eyes. It was a curious moment, because he began to believe that perhaps not all was lost. "Was I asking too much of myself?" he thought, looking down at his still legs. "Anything is possible, sir," he said quietly to Lillian. There was something different about his voice, as if he had taken a step toward a new understanding. As the days passed, he began to feel something different. Not only did his muscles respond more consistently, but his heart seemed to open in ways he hadn't expected. He felt as if the cracks in his soul were slowly filling with something new, an unexpected warmth. What had once seemed like a broken body now began to feel like something with potential, something worth exploring. The weeks passed, and one evening, as the breeze swirled across the mansion's terrace, a new chapter seemed about to begin. The silence was heavy with the anticipation of what was to come. The parallel bars and weight-bearing harness sat there, waiting, as if they knew what was coming. Lillian stood beside Michael, adjusting the apparatus with remarkable calm. In the garden, Layla, with a mischievous smile, played with a ray of sunlight that filtered through the flowers. "Today is the day," Lillian said, turning to her daughter. "Do you think he'll make it?" she asked, her eyes full of affection and expectation. Lillian leaned over to adjust Michael's harness. She smiled softly at her daughter. "Today we're going to try. Remember everything we said about patience." Layla nodded, a twinkle in her eye. "Yes, Mom, I know, but today I'm not going to rush." Michael let out a laugh, low but full of warmth. It wasn't often that he laughed, and the sound, though brief, filled the space with something unexpected. He looked at Lillian with a mixture of skepticism and hope. "Yes, I can't," he murmured, looking down at her still legs. Lillian paused for a moment, watching Michael's hands, and crouched down to his level. Her voice, low but firm, echoed in the silence of the space. "It's not trying, Michael," she said. "Remember that. Today is not a simple attempt. It's a pact with yourself. The body follows what the mind tells it to, but the mind needs faith. You're not alone in this. We're here, no matter what, and will always be." Michael took a deep breath, his eyes filling with surprise as he saw Layla, with a mischievous smile, lifting her gloves and starting to do push-ups. "Ridiculous, Mr. Michael. I'm your personal trainer. I'm practicing to help you," she said with innocent seriousness. He couldn't help but let out a short, warm laugh, which seemed to rekindle something long forgotten inside him. "And do you think you can lift me, Layla?" he joked, lighter now. Layla put her hands on her hips with a determined look. "Sure, I'm small, but I'm strong. Besides, you're already practicing lifting." Her confidence, although childish, was inspiring. Lillian, watching the moment, felt a warmth in her heart as she saw her daughter so involved in the process. With Lillian's help, Michael began adjusting the harness that would support him as he tried to use the parallel bars to stand up. Lillian calmly explained each movement, adjusting the straps with precision. "I'm not asking you to walk today, Mr. Michael," she said. "I just want you to stand up, if only for a moment. Don't think about the time. Just think about the act of standing." Michael nodded, clearly nervous. His eyes darted between the parallel bars and his limp legs. He took a deep breath and muttered to himself, "I can do this. I can do this." Layla walked over and briefly held his hand, looking up at him with a confident smile. "Of course you can, Mr. Michael. My mother always says that miracles are like flowers. First, the seed must be planted." Michael pursed his lips, trying to hide the smile that the girl's words caused him. Finally, he placed his hands on the parallel bars. His arms tensed, feeling the weight of the challenge before him. Lillian adjusted the harness one last time and patted him gently on the shoulder. "I'm here. Take a deep breath, and when you're ready, begin." He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and began to apply pressure to the bars. His arms shook with the effort, and the weight of his own body made him hesitate for a moment. But then, something changed. The tingling in his legs seemed to encourage him, reminding him that there was still something inside him, something alive, still moving. "That's right, Mr. Michael," Lillian said, her voice soft but firm. "Go slowly. Trust your hands and the harness. Today, you don't have to make it perfect. Just try." The scene was charged with tension. Every word, every movement seemed to hold the potential for something much greater. Michael kept his hands firmly on the bars, his body leaning slightly forward, immersed in the effort. But before he could take another step, the moment was abruptly interrupted by Samantha, who entered the terrace with firm steps, freezing the atmosphere. "What is happening here?" Samantha said, with a mixture of disbelief and fury upon seeing the scene before her. What is this ridiculousness? And what is this girl doing here? She pointed to Layla, who, at that moment, clasped her little hands together, trying to encourage Michael, but stepped back a little, frightened. Lillian, visibly nervous, immediately stood up and turned to Samantha, trying to explain herself. She is my daughter, Layla. I'm sorry for bringing her. This will not happen again. She took a deep breath and with a controlled but firm tone continued. And regarding what you saw, it is not ridiculous. We are working so that Mr. Michael can get up from his chair. This is the first step to walking again. Samantha let out a loud laugh that reverberated across the terrace, as cutting as her words. "Honey, do you hear this woman?" she said, looking directly at Michael. He remained silent, his jaw clenched and his eyes averted from hers. But his tense posture betrayed the restrained anger. A simple maid who came here to do your job. Clean you, bathe you, and take care of your addiction. Pretends to know more than the diagnoses of eminent specialists. She laughed again, this time with an even crueler tone. Don't make me laugh. Michael didn't move a muscle, but his hands were shaking slightly on the parallel bars. It was unclear whether it was from physical exertion or pent-up anger, but the tension was palpable. Samantha, noticing that he didn't respond, took a few more steps forward, as if she wanted to invade Michael's space and that of the other two. Her voice was venomous, cutting through the atmosphere with sharp words. Do you really believe that this woman is so educated that she can reverse what the best experts have said is irreversible? Lillian raised her hands, trying to calm the situation, her face etched with the pressure she felt. Please, Mrs. Samantha, we are in the middle of a physical therapy procedure. We must not diminish anyone's self-confidence. That is the most important thing. Faith in yourself is essential for healing. Samantha interrupted her with a scream that resonated louder than any real argument. Do you think you can play at being? She almost shouted. Her eyes, fixed on Lillian, were sharp, like knives. Where are your medical credentials? You are just a simple maid who soaps your back and takes care of your horrible scar. Samantha's mixture of mockery and contempt filled the air with a tense, heavy silence. It was then that Layla, no longer able to hold back the tears that formed in her eyes, took a step forward. Her voice, although broken, sounded brave. Mum, don't talk to my mother like that. The girl's courage caused a brief silence, but Samantha was quick to break it, her tone even more loaded with contempt. Don't worry, little one. I won't talk to her like that anymore. Because your mother, she won't work in this house anymore. She took a step towards Lillian, leaning in a little, as if to look at her closely. I hate it when they disobey my orders. I never gave your mother permission to do more for my fiancé than bathe him and take care of his personal attention. That is the task of a humble woman with short nails, not of an elegant lady with magnificent nails like mine, which cannot be ruined. Layla, now crying silently against Lillian's waist, remained silent. Her bone-white fingers were tightly gripping the parallel bars, as if trying to channel all her frustration into that gesture of restraint. Samantha finally turned to Michael with eyes full of contempt and said, in an acidic tone that pierced like a drill, You, with all your postgraduate studies and your intellectual achievements, come to listen to the idiocies of a real servant? Do you think she knows more than science? Michael, still silent, leaned forward with more determination than ever, his hands tightly gripping the parallel bars. His muscles trembled violently, but he continued to concentrate. With a gigantic effort, he managed to lift his torso from the chair, his face etched with the intensity of concentration. Layla, watching the effort closely, could not help but scream with excitement. He's getting up, with one last effort. And then, with a tired but determined movement, Michael managed to stand up. His legs were supported by the harness, and his hands were firmly gripping the bars. His chest rose and fell rapidly, but something else was evident on his face besides exhaustion. Pride. "I did it," he murmured hoarsely. The terrace was filled with a thick silence, broken only by Michael's labored breathing as he clung to the bars. Samantha watched him with a mixture of disbelief and strategy, trying in vain to regain control of the situation. Without taking his eyes off her, Michael spoke in a firm voice, full of determination. "Now I'm the one who will speak. You have exactly 10 minutes to gather your things and leave my mansion. Forever." Samantha blinked, clearly taken aback by his tone. She forced a smile and took a step forward, trying to soften what she had just heard. "What do you say, my love?" she said, her tone intended to be conciliatory, but her nervousness showed. "Look at you. You have so much inner strength. You've already managed to get up. You'll be walking again soon. You haven't moved a muscle beyond the effort of standing, but—" She was interrupted by Michael, who said coldly, "You didn't even believe me a few moments ago." Samantha raised her hands theatrically, trying to justify her behavior. "I did it on purpose, to give you the courage you needed. You know, that reverse motivation, when someone tells you not to do something and you do it faster. I relied on that. And it worked, my love. I'm a genius." She tried to hug him, but Michael remained as still as stone. His gaze fixed on her was full of disdain, and emotional exhaustion seemed to overflow from his expression. In the background, Layla, hugging her mother's waist, was also crying, but with a mixture of pride and tenderness. Samantha, seeing that Michael was not responding, took a step back, trying to save the situation. "Now we can get married," she exclaimed, forcing a laugh and moving her hands in a gesture of celebration. "How happy!" Michael kept his gaze fixed on her for a few moments, every fiber of his body struggling to stay upright. Then, with a calculated pause, he finally spoke. "You already have the answer." Samantha frowned, confused. "What question, my love?" He gave a slight, bitter smile and continued, with a calmness that cut deeper than any shout. "Don't you remember that? I asked you that shortly before the accident I suffered to protect you. Don't think about it. Something I learned from a wonderful woman whose name you don't even know." He paused, breathing heavily, but not giving up. He continued calmly. "Refresh your memory. Which came first, the chicken or the egg?" Samantha huffed, her irritation growing as the situation spiraled out of her control. "What's wrong with you, Michael? Have you gone mad? No one, not even science, can answer that." Michael looked at Lillian, who was watching him with a mixture of surprise and shyness, as if trying to understand what was happening. The tension in the air was palpable, and he couldn't help himself. "What do you think, Lillian?" he asked hastily, sensing that he was about to receive an answer that would change everything. "Which came first, the chicken or the egg?" Lillian, with impressive calm, answered with the serenity of someone who had reflected deeply on life. "First came the intention," she said, her voice soft but full of quiet wisdom. "Nothing can exist without it, the purpose of being." Samantha, who didn't seem willing to give in, huffed once more, her tone mixing mockery and indignation. "Is that wisdom? It doesn't make any sense." Michael, without losing the calm smile that seemed to reflect an unprecedented clarity, turned to Samantha. "There's the answer, Samantha," he said firmly. "Remember that I would only marry if I found the answer to that question. Well, I found it, and it wasn't from your mouth. So it's not you I'm going to marry, but this sweet woman who only calls me by my name." Samantha took a step back, defeated. Her face was red with anger, but she kept quiet, as if the words had disappeared in the face of Michael's certainty. He had found what he was looking for. Finally, exhausted, Michael let himself fall into the wheelchair. His face was covered in sweat, but his eyes reflected a peace he hadn't felt in years. Lillian and Layla ran to him, wrapping him in a tight hug, with tears and laughter mixed together. His voice still cracking, Michael looked at Lillian and, with a twinkle in his eye, said, "Did you hear that, Lillian? What an honor to be my wife." Surprised and moved, Lillian smiled, lighting up the room around her. "I heard, and I love you too, Michael." Emotion took over her as the words came from the depths of her soul. Layla, hugging them both, exclaimed with a huge smile, "I love you too, Dad." The three of them embraced, a hug full of happiness as the sun set on the horizon, witnessing a new beginning. Months later, with the help of a walker with wheels and supports, Michael entered a small church. Lillian was waiting for him at the altar, radiant in her white dress. Beside him, Layla held a bouquet of flowers, looking proudly at the man she now called Dad. The man who had lost everything now had everything because he had finally found what really mattered. He had learned a valuable lesson: never judge a book by its cover. After the wedding, when the guests had dispersed amidst laughter and well-wishes, Michael and Lillian found a moment of peace in a corner of the church garden. Layla ran happily among the flowers, gathering fallen petals while singing a cheerful melody. Michael, leaning on his walker, his hand clasped in Lillian's, watched his daughter with a smile of love and gratitude. Michael looked at Lillian with a soft smile that seemed to light up everything around him. "Before I met you, I thought my life was ruined. I didn't understand that sometimes the people who were supposed to grow flowers in our garden ended up tearing our petals off. But you not only grew new flowers in my life, you also helped heal the roots of the jasmine." Lillian looked at him, her eyes filled with tears, but a radiant smile lighting up her face. "The roots are not visible," she replied with a touch of tenderness, "but they are what give the tree its strength. And you, Michael, are that tree. Today, you don't just bloom, you bloom with us, as a family." The conversation was silent for a moment, until Layla ran up to them, a small bouquet of makeshift petals in her hands. "Dad, look! The garden is giving us flowers again," she exclaimed with joy. Michael took the bouquet with trembling hands. It wasn't weakness, but the intensity of what he felt. He looked at Lillian, then at Layla, and finally at the sky. "Yes," he said softly, pressing the petals carefully. "Now I know that when we are cared for with love, even scars can bloom." The wind blew gently, carrying with it the echo of his words as the family embraced under the warm light of the sunset. It was the beginning of a new chapter, full of hope, love, and new beginnings. And you, dear listener, if you have come this far, it is because you have an attentive heart and a soul open to the lessons that only stories can teach us. Not everyone stops to listen, feel, and reflect on what these stories tell us, and this demonstrates a unique sensitivity worthy of admiration. This story brings 7 truths that illuminate even the darkest paths. The first is that strength does not come from the absence of falls, but from the ability to get up, even when our legs tremble and our heart doubts. In moments of greatest weakness, we discover our true strength. Genuine love does not promise perfection, but companionship. It does not seek to save, but to sustain. It is a refuge built with sincere actions, not with empty words. The greatest miracles are not those that defy the laws of nature, but those that transform wounds into opportunities to start over. Each small step has the power to change everything when we choose faith instead of fear. Faith does not guarantee immediate success, but it gives us the courage to try. And in trying, we find our purpose. Sometimes the answers we seek are not in the obvious, but in the deeper meaning, like the roots that nourish the tree. Our invisible intentions determine what blossoms in our lives. True change begins in the invisible, in our beliefs, in our hopes, and in our most silent intentions. Everything we see has its origin in what we do not see. Life tests us with challenges, not to destroy us, but to reveal who we really are. Each obstacle overcome is a reminder that we have the strength to heal, grow, and love. May this story inspire you to face your own challenges with courage, to embrace your wounds as signs of the path traveled, and to find, in love, faith, and gratitude, the pillars to move forward. Because in the end, it is not about how much progress we make, but how we love, learn, and transform our lives and the lives of those around us. If you want to help our channel, it is easy. Just like this video, subscribe to the channel and share this story on WhatsApp with your friends. At the end of the video, 2 more stories made especially for you will appear. Access one of them and watch it, because you will be surprised.